The Hard Shoulder with Kieran Cuddihy.
With Nissan.
On Newstalk.
Something we talked about a little bit earlier was the Angelus. So the Angelus didn't play last night on RTE1 television just before the news. Now, they released a statement, RTE, to us earlier when we inquired as to why this happened. They said, due to rolling news coverage of President Biden's historic visit to Ireland, the Angelus was not broadcast on RTE1 on Wednesday evening. The Angelus is continually available on RTE Player to stream at any time and is also broadcast daily on RTE Radio 1. Now, this evening, they repeated the trick. The Angelus was not broadcast on RTE television, on RTE1 television. They did broadcast it on RTE2, apparently. Of course, I'm on air when all this happens, but I've been told they decided to move the Angelus onto RTE2. Michael Nugent is with me in studio, the chairperson of Atheist Ireland. Michael, I mean, we dodged a bullet. We nearly had 2 days without the Angelus. Heaven forbid.
And somehow we survived.
Should they get rid of it?
Well, of course they should. I mean, this is just silly. You know, the fact that they can arbitrarily stop it for, a foreign dignitary arriving shows they don't even take it seriously. It's one of these nonsensical things that's a hang-up from an earlier Ireland. The RTE has a legal duty to be editorially impartial with regards to religion, and they're not. They essentially give the Catholic Church a free ad worth about 2 million a year on their rate cards, just before the main 6 o'clock news, to broadcast a Catholic call to prayer. And then they insult us even more by saying that it's not a Catholic call to prayer, it's a moment of reflection for everybody, which everyone knows that it isn't.
Oh, well, it is though. Didn't they get rid of all the Catholic imagery, and now there's people going about their daily life, there's nice shots of nature, there's no crucifixes or churches or anything like that?
Well, here's the biggest clue that it's the Angelus. They call it the Angelus. You know, there's no ambiguity about it. It's the bells of the Angelus, which is a Catholic call to prayer. They say that everyone can reflect on it, but that makes it even worse. At least the old version had the integrity of being openly sectarian. What they're now saying is that everybody, whatever their religion or non-religious philosophical beliefs, everybody should pause for a moment of reflection under a Catholic call to prayer. I mean, that's absolutely outrageous. If RTE were to say, well, RTE wouldn't do this, but let's say if you were in an atheistic state that actively promoted atheism, and every day they promoted some call for people to say that there's no God, and Catholics complained about it, and they were told, well, you can pray during it. You know, that it's not the role of a public service broadcaster to promote any religion, and we would be just as opposed to RTE promoting atheism before the 6 o'clock news as we are to RTE promoting Catholicism before the 6 o'clock news.
Do you think the 6 o'clock news should be the 6 o'clock as opposed to 6-1, or is there an argument for a moment of reflection? There's a bit of kind of soft music, maybe some Irish music, some of those same scenes are used, that there's a kind of a mindfulness moment before the news.
Well, I've no problem with that. If that's what RTE chooses to do editorially, but then they shouldn't call it the Angelus. They should call it a moment of reflection.
There is an argument that was made earlier by one of our guests that it's part of our tradition whether we like it or not. It is. It has become a tradition, and that was kind of reflected in an exit poll that was done around the time of the last presidential election, wherein 61% of people said they were in favour of retaining the Angelus at the start of the 6-1 news.
Well, it's part of the tradition that locked away women and raped children organised by the Catholic Church, for whom this is a call to prayer. So
that's not the only thing the church did now.
It's not the only thing, but it's part of it if you're talking about tradition.
Yeah.
So it's certainly not a tradition that everybody would feel good about having it celebrated at 6 o'clock every day.
Yeah, it's also a tradition that educated the entire country and provided healthcare when the state was incapable of doing it.
Yeah, in order to evangelise culture. That's the policy of the Vatican, is to evangelise culture. That's not my language. That's their official policy. That's how they spread their religion. And the Angelus would come under a concept called pre-evangelisation if it's being broadcast on a national broadcast. This is all part of their policy, isn't it? It's not something I'm making up. So
why is there such support for it amongst people?
Well, I think partly because we live in a country where we've grown up with certain things seeming to be normal. It seems to be normal that the Catholic Church runs 90% of our primary schools. It seems to be normal that you have to swear an oath to God in order to become president or judge or Taoiseach. It seems to be normal that you have our parliamentarians starting each day with a prayer. But if hypothetically, if you looked at those the other way around, and if you imagined, I'm not looking for this, but if you imagine that in order to become president or a judge or Taoiseach, you have to swear that there's no God, or if there were schools, state-funded schools, actively teaching children that there's no God, and Catholic families had to send their children to those schools, they would immediately realise that it's wrong then. But there's a blind spot because we've grown up with it, so we just think that it's normal, and because atheists aren't looking for the opposite, secularism, which is just neutrality, they seem to think that that's what atheism is.
But what about the argument that it's part of our cultural tapestry? You know, that Catholicism is in this country. You know, whether people subscribe to the faith anymore or not, it is part of our cultural heritage, and we are inheritors of that.
Well, and if people want to be Catholic, that's fine. You know, if people want to spend all day playing the Angelus, that's fine. I mean, I've absolutely no problem. In fact, I support strongly the right to freedom of religion or belief and the right of everybody.
But even the non-religious, we still live in a society that is, by its nature, it has kind of a cultural Catholic element to it, doesn't it?
Well, historically it does, certainly. And historically before that it had a pagan element, but we don't celebrate that today on the National Broadcasting Service. But it's increasingly changing. If you look at, say, the last 3 referendums on abortion, marriage equality and blasphemy, it's a fairly consistent 2-1 majority, you know, for liberal secular approaches to these type of issues. Now, I accept that means that there's, you know, 1 in 3 people still believe the opposite, and they're perfectly entitled to. But RTE as a national broadcaster, put aside the population, RTE as a national broadcaster has a duty to be impartial among these beliefs. And as I say, I would be just as opposed to RTE promoting atheism or secularism before the news as I am to them promoting religion.
Well, like I said, huge amounts of people have been getting in touch about this issue since we started talking about it earlier in the show. And Kieran in Dublin is on the line. Kieran, do you think RTE should scrap the Angelus?
Thanks for talking to me, Kieran. No, I don't believe they should. And you're last.
Oh, we've lost Kieran there. Chris O'Reilly as well is with us in County Cork. Chris, do you think RTE should scrap the Angelus?
Well, to tell you the truth, I don't really care. I mean, but I think that there's a lot of people that actually do, and as RTE is the state provider, then, I mean, their opinions that it should be taken into account as well. And, I mean, it's 1 minute in a day. I mean, that's it. You know, it brings peace to people. It does. I mean, as I said myself, I have no interest in religion whatsoever. But, I mean, it brings peace to a lot of people, so there's no harm in it.
What about
why bother?
Well, what about the argument, Chris, that, you know, people could have that moment of peace or quiet reflection without it being called the Angelus and without the dongs, the 3 3s and the 9, you know, that you could have a bit of music or something quiet and contemplative.
Again, what's that? An Irish solution for an Irish problem? I mean, there is people who are religious in this country. I know people don't like to admit that anymore. So, but I mean, for 1 minute in the day, let them. I mean, there's more important things to worry about in the country. I mean, I think actually taking religion out of schools is a lot more important.
Yeah,
you know, that there should be a complete separation of church and state. But this is the national broadcaster actually broadcasting to some of the population of the country. I mean, if you want to talk about it, RT puts on a lot of stuff that I think is crap. So, you know, but, you know, at the end of the day, it's hurting nobody. I mean, that's what it is. It's giving some people peace. It's mainly the old generation. And eventually, as one lady was on earlier from the younger generation, as she says, when they pass on, things will change. Yeah, then change it. I mean, leave the people that are getting peace from it at the moment, leave them alone. I mean, it's 1 minute in the day. It doesn't hurt. Why do we always have to have conflict? You know, we don't need it. I mean, let them.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, that's basically what it is. And I know there's a lot of people out there have no belief in religion. I'm one of them. But that doesn't mean I have to step down on somebody else's beliefs.
Well, Kieran...
let them.
Yeah. I know, listen, thanks, Chris. And Kieran is back on the line in Dublin, I understand. Kieran, you don't think they should get rid of it, is that right?
Hi, Kieran. I just think we should be a bit more patient and a bit more tolerant. Both speakers have made excellent points, but it's interwoven in the nation that we are. We celebrate the Book of Kells, we have St. Patrick's Day, we have St. Bridget's Day, Easter, we celebrate Christmas. All religions take part in those holidays, whether it be away from work or away from school. We celebrate the Skellig Islands with Star Wars and the monks that build those amazing buildings back in their day. I just feel we have to acknowledge, as your last speaker said about leaving it on, let's cancel Irish because not everybody speaks Irish, or RTE shouldn't put on any Irish. It is part of our history, as the first speaker made points that there were some faults in that history, but we have to keep a little bit. And my parents in their 80s, they take their moment for their Angelus. It's an important part of who they are and what the life they've lived. And I don't think the three referendum, I've gone through those, and Ireland has progressed and changed its views. But I do believe we should take our time and not just throw everything out so quickly, and give people a chance to adapt to the change in the country that we're becoming. We've had the three referendums, huge change in our culture, but we also must respect our culture from the past and understand that it is part of us. Not perfect, with some faults, some very drastic faults, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But it is who we are, with the Book of Kells and the monks and the monasteries and as you mentioned, the education of so many people who got a lot of from the church. But I think the tradition of the Angelus shouldn't be swiped just yet. I just think it should be tolerated for a particular set of our generation. And you know, I've heard you do pieces on banking and how people in their 70s and 80s can't survive and they can't pay their gas bills or get their pensions. Can we not just leave a little bit of tradition, a little bit of safety for some of our population? I just think it's important that we just don't get rid of everything.
Well, listen, Kieran, thanks a million for joining us, and to Chris as well in Cork. Michael Nugent of Atheist Ireland is still with me. Michael, on that point that Kieran made, I guess it kind of he put it much better with the point I was trying to make, that essentially our society and culture and history is kind of imbued with Catholic tradition, and he listed off kind of our saints' days and the big festivals and celebrations.
Well, ironically, that would be a stronger argument for what RTE used to say the Angelus was, when they used to accept that it was a Catholic call to prayer. But that's not what RTE says it is. What RTE is saying is that everybody, regardless of our religious or non-religious beliefs, should pause under a Catholic call to prayer to reflect for a moment. So if that is what they want, and that's what they say it is, despite everybody knowing it's the Angelus, they shouldn't call it the Angelus.
Well, I don't think they said they should pause. People can pause. I don't think they're telling Muslims
they can.
That they have to.
Yeah, they can. And equally, Catholics can pause for a moment's prayer without the National Broadcasting Service telling them to do so. You know, Catholics around the world seem to manage quite fine without their National Broadcasting Service telling them to pray at 6 o'clock every day. You know, and it's also, I would have thought that from a Catholic perspective, if I was a Catholic, I would be more upset that the National Broadcasting Service is trying to change a Catholic call to prayer into something else. That's not the role of the national broadcaster either.
Should the national broadcaster not reflect the nation? And we are a Judeo-Christian nation.
We're not a Judeo-Christian nation.
Are we not?
We were. And if you want to talk about the nation, if you want to use past things, we were a pagan nation, but the National Broadcasting Service isn't celebrating that.
I don't think the National Broadcaster existed when we were a pagan nation now.
No, but equally we're not a Christian nation now. We're an increasingly pluralist nation.
Yeah, increasingly so, but are we pluralist?
I think we are. We're a pluralist country that is gradually...
The census would suggest that we are overwhelmingly Christian.
Well, the census is based on flawed data, and even the National Census Organisation accepts that it's a flawed question that leads to an increased number of people saying that they're religious because they're culturally religious. If you want to look at the true figures for Catholicism in Ireland, you look at mass attendance and you look at the state of the Catholic Church. We're an increasingly a pluralist country with many different religious and non-religious beliefs, and the only way that the state, including the national broadcaster, can equally respect everybody's right to be religious or non-religious based on their beliefs is for the state and the state broadcaster to remain neutral on that.
Well, they've moved the Angelus anyway this evening. They moved it from RTE1 to RTE2. We'll have to see whether they move it back or they move it off the TV screens altogether in the future. Michael, thanks a million for coming into studio. Michael Nugent is the chair of Atheist Ireland. Thanks to Chris and Kieran as well.
The Hard Shoulder with Kieran Cuddihy
with Nissan
on Newstalk.